Our message today comes from a special verse in Hebrews chapter 10, verses 23. And as we begin today, I want to invite you to do something that we don't normally do. And I invite you to read it with me, to say it out loud. And a little bit, I'm asking you to do that, to claim it a little bit, to claim it for your own life. So let's read this verse together. Are you ready? Let's go. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Now, hope is something that is fleeting. Hope is something that we have, and then sometimes we have high hope, and sometimes we have low hope. Sometimes our hope wanes. Our hope dissipates. It goes away. For whatever reason, we can become hopeless in this life. And there's nothing worse in this life than becoming hopeless. And I would submit to you that there's nothing better than having hope. In fact, having the hope in the one thing that can give us real hope. Let's talk about that today. Let me ask you a question as we begin. What's the hardest physical challenge you've ever faced in your life? I mean, like physically, what race did you run? Circumstance did you overcome? Day did you work? I think I've had a couple of hard physical challenges. One of them was when I ran my first half marathon. And I share that because I ran my first half marathon alone. Because I wanted to make sure that I could do it before I went to the race with all the people and the t-shirt and the finish line. And I went to the local park. There was a 4-mile loop, and it took a lot of discipline to stay focused for 13.1 miles and finish in a pretty decent time, one that gave me confidence I was going to be able to do it. And when I finally got to the finish line, I finished near the children's playground. And when I hit that mark, 13.1 miles, I went, woo, like that. And I was a little bit leery and sweaty, and the mamas on the playground started calling the babies back over to them. Another physical challenge happened in one of those mud runs. Anybody here ever done one of those obstacle course mud? Yeah, all right. I got some brothers in crime here. I didn't know there would be ice. They didn't tell me there's going to be ice as part of this mud run. So we go, through the tunnel and up the hill, and there's this big pool of ice. And you can't just run through it and just get, knee deep. You actually have to submerge your body twice. You have to submerge your body fully in the ice. The only thing is your little knuckles sticking out of the ice hanging onto that bar so you won't get lost down in there. And you can pull yourself up and you go under and back up and you go, and then you go under and back up. And then you get out on the other side of the ice and you look back at your wife and you go, come on, June, you can do it, like that. And she sticks her toe in and she goes, I don't think so. And she walks around it. Some people are smarter than others. Well, physical challenges can certainly beat us up. And often physical challenges are tied to the greater challenges in life. But I would say that the greater challenges in life are those that are emotional or spiritual. Those that happen in our mind and in our heart. Because those are the places that hope rises and falls. For me, one of the greatest emotional challenges in my life that was tied to a physical challenge was a failed surgery that gave me severe vertigo for a period of weeks. Nausea. When you throw up 4 weeks later, it's severe vertigo, and I couldn't drive and I couldn't sleep laying down because it would make me sick. And I had to sleep standing up. We got this little L-shaped sofa, and I get in that corner. I'm so thankful for that L-shaped sofa where I could sleep. It was hard. Anytime you turn your head, the world just goes like that. And there for a moment, I was wondering, would I ever find healing? Would I ever find release from that? And there were a couple of moments or places that made me feel really hopeless. It's easy to get in that place. We can feel betrayed by someone else. We can feel forgotten. We can know that we've messed up, that we've sinned against God and against other people. And in the midst of that, we wonder if we're ever going to get it right. And it can make us feel hopeless that life's ever going to work out. And so I'd ask you today, what are your challenges? Where is your hope being challenged? Because today we're going to talk about a sustaining hope, a special sustaining hope. And I don't think we know what's going on in the life of the people around us many times. Well, we may know a little bit. We may know one thing. We might even know two things. We might have one really good friend where we know almost everything. But I remember as a pastor loving on a family whose 14-year-old son died tragically in a car accident on the way home from a Braves game with another family. It was devastating to their family, to our community. And I'll always remember the circumstances around it. And I'll always remember the fact that a man who I'd been friends with for 10 years stepped forward, not a family member, a church member, stepped forward in the midst of that situation, tried to bring healing to it by revealing that he lost his daughter when she was 13 years old. I had known Stan for 10 years, and I never knew that he lost his daughter when she was 13 years old. I share that to say, I don't know what's going on with you. And you might not know everything that's going on with me. And we don't know what's going on with each other. So let's be gentle with each other. And let's be helpful to each other. Because we're all facing life's challenges. We all stand in this tension of a hope that comes and goes, that wanes and increases a hope. And that's why we're told here in Hebrews to hang on. To hang on tightly. To not let that hope waver. You see, hope sustains us. Hold tightly, without wavering, to the hope that we affirm. We can trust God with that hope. We can trust God to keep His promise. You see, the hope we have is not just a probability, it's a promise. See, our hope we have as followers of Jesus Christ is not the hope of a wish. It's the hope of the God who created us. It's not just a hope in anything. It's a hope in the God who proved His love for us by the gift of His Son. But it's easy to misplace our hope, isn't it? In fact, I would say that the things that get us in trouble most in life are probably the places where we misplace our hope, where we put our hope in the wrong things, where we put our hope in unhealthy things. We can put our hope in a person. We can put our hope in a certain group of people I want to be involved with. We can put our hope in a government. We can put our hope in an ideology. We can put our hope in a system. We can put our hope in things. We can put our hope in wealth. We can put our hope in experiences, in an image, in a promotion. We can put our hope in the achievement of a goal. We can put our hope into entrance into a certain college or a marriage. We can put our hope into a certain outcome. In fact, anytime that our expectations are separated from our experiences in life, and those expectations and those experiences get too far apart, our hope tends to wane. Because I thought life would turn out this way, and it hasn't. So I must not be a good person. Karma must be getting me. But Jesus doesn't believe in karma. Did you know that? Because Jesus offered grace. And grace is bigger than karma. Well, let me give one more example of how we put our hope in different things. I want to talk about cigarettes for a minute. You're like, what? Come on, Pastor. I want to talk about cigarettes. Have you ever met anybody who smokes who said, I'm really so glad I smoke. I take great joy in it. And here's a pack for you. I hope you'll join me in smoking. You'll love it. Have you ever met that person? I've never met, every person I've met who's ever smoked has said, man, I'm trying to quit. I wish I'd never started this. And part of me is like, well, if you're older, I sort of get it because it was really trendy and people got addicted and they didn't even know they were getting addicted at one time. But if you're younger, like we've known for years, this stuff causes cancer and it's addictive. And where did you get the idea that that wouldn't happen to you? No, I've never done that. Never actually done that. And I'm not here to point a finger at you if you smoke. I know you want to quit because everybody I've ever met who smokes says, I want to quit, you know? So that's not the point here, but here is the point. I don't believe that smoking starts because people look at a pack of cigarettes in the convenience store and they say, I would really like to be addicted to smoking. I believe it starts because of misplaced hope. Because somewhere in that cigarette, we think that we fall to peer pressure. So we think, if I smoke, I can be part of this certain group. So we put our hope in that group. We say, hey, I'll be mature if I smoke. So we put our hope into, maybe we think, hey, I'll have freedom if I smoke. Or maybe we just want the thrill of throwing caution to the wind. And that's what we put our hope in. Maybe we put our hope in the image that comes with smoking. I'm going to be the tough Marlboro man. Like that. Right? Doesn't the tough guy always smoke, right? Because they don't care about their body. They're like a rock, Or maybe it was just we put our hope in the extra buzz we could get at a party. I don't know how smoking works. I don't know how nicotine and alcohol interact, but they tend to go together, right? And so we put our buzz. Maybe we started smoking because we saw that it comforted other people in a time of need, and we were at a really low time. We thought, if I smoke a cigarette, it'll help me get through this hard time. But whatever we did, when we started smoking, we were putting our hope in a hope that wouldn't last. And for a follower of Jesus, hope is full of tension for us, by the way, because we live in the in-between time. We place our hope in the promise of Jesus Christ, but our hope will not be fulfilled until the future coming and return of Jesus Christ. And we live in the in-between times. Does that make sense? We have a foundation that's waiting on a fulfillment. You see, the work of Jesus Christ is the hope of the world. Because Jesus was God, and God gave us Jesus, and Jesus is the way to God, and Jesus is the path where we find forgiveness of our sin, and Jesus is the one solid foundation we can place our hope in above any other that serves as the foundation that will lead to the fulfillment of the promise. Now, any of y'all recognize the name Augustus McCrae? How about Gus McCrae? Oh, we got one. We got one Lonesome Dove fan here. Well, the great cowboy Augustus McCrae, in one of the scenes from Lonesome Dove, was thinking about the promise that the other cowboy, Jake Spoon, had made. And he was a little bit of a scoundrel. And he was promising to Lorena, right? Lorena? He was promising to her that he would get her out of dusty old Lonesome Dove and get her over to the big city of her dreams, San Francisco. And the great cowboy Augustus McCrae looks into that situation and the promise of Mr. Spoon, Jake Spoon, and the promise he made to the girl he wanted to impress. And he says this. He says, Jake is too leaky of a vessel to put much hope in. Jake is too leaky of a vessel to put much hope in. And then he adds to that. He says, but all vessels leak to some degree. Now that's cowboy wisdom for you right there. We all leak hope to some degree. And when we get leaky for different reasons. We get leaky because of holes we punch in our own heart. We get leaky because we injure ourselves and others, because we behave badly, because we sin, because we place our hope in things that are destructive. But we also get leaky because of people and circumstances and people that punch us and people poke holes in us and people tell us we're not good and people tell us things that aren't true and people try to use us to get what they want instead of what is good. See, so I want to ask you, where are you leaky? Where's your hope leaking out? But I'll ask you a bigger question than that. The bigger question is this. If everyone leaks hope, then what or who can hold my hope? If everyone leaks hope, then what or who can hold my hope? Because the promise of the Scripture tells us. It encourages us. It demands of us. Let us right now hold tightly without wavering to what the hope we affirm. For God can be trusted to keep His promise. Now, that sounds pretty generic. The hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep His promise. Every verse has a context. Every verse has a book of the Bible. Every verse has a testament. This verse comes from Hebrews. Hebrews is about the superiority, the grandeur, the amazingness, the glory of Jesus Christ and the work of Jesus Christ. And there's some words here that sound a little bit confusing, but I'm going to explain them to you because I'm a preacher and that's my job. Right before this verse, we're told about the work of Jesus, but we're told about it in a way that He transformed what happened in the Old Testament. So listen to just a couple of verses here. It says, under the Old Covenant, the priest stands and ministers before the altar day after day, offering the same sacrifices again and again, which can never take away sins. Wow. And then it says, but our high priest offered himself to God as a single sacrifice for sins, good for all time. Then he sat down in the right place of honor at God's right hand. And then we come over a couple more verses, and he says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, we can boldly enter heaven's most holy place because of the blood of Jesus. By His death, Jesus opened a new and life-giving way through the curtain into the most holy place. Now, what are they talking about? What's the most holy place? You see, there was this temple back then. And today we have churches with sanctuaries or worship centers, and some churches get really uptight about the sanctuary. They're like, don't talk too loud in there, don't run, don't, And at Hope Church, we have a little bit different theology. We have a room where we worship God in, and I believe we have a New Testament theology that isn't overly tied to the Old Testament, but there's nothing wrong with having a sanctuary that's more of a sacred place, unless you yell at kids for running in there, unless you get on to the person who's never been to church who wears a hat in there, unless you say, you can't bring your food in there, unless someone eats in there and you say, you are dishonoring God. Unless you do all that, then it's okay to have that place because people are bigger than places like that. But what happened in the Old Testament is that there was a temple. And the temple had a holy place that nobody else could go except for the high priest. And here's how it worked. Let me jump down here. So there were like ranks of people. So I'm going to rank you guys today. Okay? So there were like places you could sit in the temple that were meant for certain people, and then there was the place, the Holy of Holies, behind the curtain. So, for example, over here on the very back, maybe even outside of the temple, we had the ranking of basic pagan. What, y'all want to be pagans? You're not happy for them to be pagans? So you guys are our basic, like, Gentile people. You're not really into this. You don't even know what's going on. But we sort of let you come around and stand near the front door, right? Just to sort of peek in. But you're not in. You don't have the right blood type. So don't even think about it, okay? You with me? Stay out. And then we come in here and we have your general non-priest Jewish lowlife. Now, Jesus was Jewish, and this is Jewish, Old Testament Jewish history, and we have sort of the folks who they were just living life, and they wanted to hang on to their religion because they were born into a Jewish family. So, good job. Abraham, I don't know Jewish names. Over here, we got the priest, but you guys aren't the good priests. You are the ones who didn't do well on your SAT scores, and you didn't get in the best colleges. Okay, so you guys are like the priests, but not really. Like, none of these people really respect you, and these guys tell you what to do. You hear me? All right. Now, these guys are like the big priests, and y'all didn't know you were going to be the big priest this morning, did you? And you see how they're a smaller group. You see how this works, don't you? These guys are the big priests, and it took a while to get here. So most of these guys are older. I mean, we're talking, it took a couple of decades to get to be one of these priests, because you had to be one of these priests first, and you started out over there. And then there's a high priest. Just one. Just one high priest, who probably took 30 or 40 or even 50 years to get to be high priest. And the high priest typically is pretty old. And probably pretty frail. But every so often, that high priest had a very special duty. They went to a place that nobody else could go. In fact, they were so old that when they went into that place called the Holy of Holies, they had to tie a rope around their ankle in case they killed over in there. Nobody else could enter the Holy of Holies except a high priest, so they'd have to drag the priest back out. Right? Don't have a heart attack in the Holy of Holies. They're dragging you out. Okay? So the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies. Now, imagine this is a curtain and not a door. Okay? The high priest would go in here where nobody else could go. Only the high priest, and only the high priest before him, and only the high priest after him would go in here. And the high priest would come in here, and the high priest would make a sacrifice to God. And here's basically what the high priest would say, is, God, I give you this sacrifice so you will forgive the sins of all those people out there. Did you wonder if you're going to have to drag me out? Yeah. Well, that's the way it worked. And there was this curtain that only the high priest... And you know what? When Jesus was resurrected from the grave, you know what happened to that curtain? It was torn in two, and it no longer exists. And you know what happened to the Holy of Holies? The Holy of Holies now resides in the high priest Jesus Christ. And we, all of us, every category of us, even the high priest, have full access to Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of our sins, because Jesus is the hope of the world. Jesus is the promise that Hebrew talks about. Jesus can be trusted. Jesus is the foundation of our faith. that has not yet been fulfilled and will be fulfilled with his coming. And we live in between times, and he is our hope, and nothing else can replace it. The Bible tells us that God loved us so much that Jesus, he died so that everyone could have eternal life. We find out that if we're thirsty, that Jesus is the water of life. We found out that if we're hungry, that Jesus is the bread of life. We found out that if we're weary, that Jesus' light, his load is light. We find out that if we don't know where to go, that his yoke is easy. We find out that Jesus comes not only to give life, but to give it abundantly. Jesus is our hope, and there's nothing else that we can place our hope in. And I want to ask you, are you allowing Jesus to hold your hope? Are you coming to Jesus to sustain life and faith? Are you putting your hope in something else? Or worse yet, are you showing up at church and living like an Old Testament Christian, expecting the priest to go in their holy room and pray for you? I'm not a priest, by the way. But if I were, I couldn't pray for you enough to save your soul. I couldn't pray for you enough to bring the hope of Jesus into your life. We have a personal responsibility to interact with God, and that interaction is the hope of the world. Do you know the foundation of hope in Jesus Christ? Is life becoming full of the promises of God as we live life into an eternity with him, as we see life in perspective differently, as we see people as valuable and things as useful? It's Jesus, our hope. I want to invite Cody and Chelsea to come forward and sing our last song today. We're going to talk about a special hope. We're going to talk about how that hope as a foundation in Jesus and then the fulfillment in the future in Jesus Christ, how we live into that tension. And I want to invite you to allow this song to be a heart cry today. Because tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year, you're going to find that you have a leaky vessel. And there's only one hope that can hold that. There's only one place that we can hang on to tightly, that we can completely trust, and that will ultimately fulfill its promise. And that's the hope of Jesus Christ.